The king had fallen, just like that. One moment Khalid al-Mansour was commanding boardrooms, making million-dollar deals over black coffee and gold-plated cigars, and the next, flat on his back, motionless, trapped in a coma. The man who controlled everything, his businesses, his rivals, even the whispers in high society, now couldn't even open his eyes. And that's when the wolves came out. They arrived in designer suits and crocodile smiles, not to mourn, but to feast. His so-called loving relatives, the ones who barely sent birthday messages, now had front row seats at his mansion, shedding fake tears while calculating their cut. The ink on his medical report wasn't even dry, and they were already fighting over his wealth like hyenas around fresh meat. But they had one problem. Leila al-Mansour, his wife, his protector, a woman who had seen greed before, smelled it in the perfume of distant cousins and the handshakes of two-faced uncles. She wasn't just grieving, she was watching, waiting, ready. Because if they thought they could rob Khalid blind while he lay unconscious, they had no idea what kind of hell she was about to unleash. Let the games begin. The first few days were a circus. Relatives who hadn't visited in years suddenly became concerned family members, hovering around the hospital, whispering in corners, throwing dramatic sighs like they were auditioning for a soap opera. "Oh, poor Khalid," they'd say, dabbing dry eyes with silk handkerchiefs. But behind those crocodile tears, greed, thick, sticky, shameless greed. Leila saw right through it. She watched as they started sniffing around his businesses, casually asking about accounts, innocently bringing up inheritance laws over dinner. One uncle, let's call him Uncle Faisal, because why not, even had the nerve to suggest that Khalid would have wanted him to help manage things in his absence. Help? More like sink his teeth in and never let go. But Leila wasn't some fragile, grieving widow. Oh no. She was Khalid's wife for a reason. While they plotted, she prepared. While they whispered, she listened. And while they schemed, she sharpened her claws. Because if they thought she'd sit back and let them pick apart her husband's empire like vultures on a carcass, they were about to learn the hard way. This queen wasn't burying her king just yet. The vultures didn't waste time. They swooped in, dressed in designer suits and phony grief, circling the mansion like it was a buffet, and Khalid's empire was the main course. Cousins Leila barely knew started showing up with exaggerated frowns and empty words. "We're just here to support you, dear." Yeah, right. Support her or support their own pockets? And then came the whispers, the concerned conversations behind her back. Can she even handle all this? Maybe we should take over for now. Wouldn't Khalid want his family to be taken care of? Oh, they were good, playing the loving relatives while subtly trying to pry open the vault. But Leila wasn't some naive, weeping widow. She was Khalid's wife, the woman who had watched him build his empire, brick by golden brick. And if they thought she'd let them rip it apart while he lay in a hospital bed, they were about to get the shock of their lives. It started small, requests for temporary access to accounts, just to keep things running. A few suspicious signatures appearing on documents she knew Khalid hadn't signed. Then came the lawyers, relatives arriving with legal papers that, surprise, surprise, conveniently gave them a stake in Khalid's fortune. "He promised me this," one cousin claimed. "We had an agreement," another swore. Lies, bold-faced, shameless lies. They were testing her, poking at the fortress, seeing if she'd crack. But Leila, she was just getting warmed up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw tantrums. No. She smiled. She played along. Let them think she was overwhelmed, confused. Let them believe they were winning. Because while they were busy plotting their heist, she was digging, investigating, finding every loophole, every hidden clause, every way to turn their greed against them. And when the moment was right, when they were just arrogant enough to think they had her cornered, she would burn their schemes to the ground. Because if they thought Khalid's coma meant open season on his fortune, they had no idea what kind of storm was coming for them. The mansion had become a battlefield, but the enemies weren't wearing armor. They were wearing expensive watches, fake smiles, and the scent of desperation disguised as concern. Every day, another Helpful relatives showed up, offering their oh-so-generous assistance in managing Khalid's affairs. Leila, you must be exhausted. Let us take some of this weight off your shoulders. It's what Khalid would have wanted. Oh, please, if Khalid could hear them, he'd rip out his IV and throw them out himself. But Leila, she played her part well. She let them think she was fragile, let them assume she was drowning in grief and stress. She poured tea, nodded along, even let out a few well-placed sighs, just enough to keep them comfortable in their delusion. Because the truth, she wasn't drowning, she was watching, waiting, and while they scrambled to outmaneuver her, she was already 10 steps ahead. Behind closed doors, she was working. Hard, digging through paperwork, tracing money trails, consulting Khalid's most trusted advisors, the ones who actually had loyalty, not just greed. And that's when she found it. The first crack in their little scheme, a signed business transfer that had a date from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, when Khalid had already been in a coma. Cute, sloppy, and more importantly, illegal. Oh, but it got better. One of the grieving uncles, Uncle Faisal again, because of course it was, had been quietly trying to push through a court motion, declaring Khalid unfit to control his own assets. Translation? They wanted power of attorney. They wanted control. They wanted it all. And they thought she wouldn't notice? Adorable. Leila was done playing hostess, done pretending she didn't see the knives behind their backs. It was time to let them know who they were really dealing with. So she made her first move. She called a lawyer, a ruthless, cutthroat lawyer, the kind who could dismantle an opponent with a single clause. And then she arranged a family meeting. Oh, they walked in confident, thinking they were about to seal the deal, take what they had come for. But the moment they saw the legal documents spread across the table, the forged signatures, the undeniable proof of their betrayal, the room went silent. Checkmate? Oh, not yet. This was just the opening move. Because if they thought they were going to steal from Khalid al-Mansour and get away with it, they had no idea what kind of war they had just started. The silence in the room was delicious. The same people who had been circling like sharks just hours ago, flashing fake sympathy and well-rehearsed concern, were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Papers lay spread across the mahogany table. Documents they thought they had buried deep, signatures they had forged, deals they had tried to sneak past her. And now it was all out in the open, laid bare like a crime scene, with their fingerprints all over it. Leila let the silence stretch. She watched them squirm, the way their confident smirks cracked into nervous glances. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice calm, almost too calm. So, who wants to explain this? She tapped the document at the center of the table, the one with Khalid's forged signature dated after his coma. The one that proved without a doubt that they weren't just greedy, they were criminals. Uncle Faisal, because of course, Uncle Faisal, cleared his throat, forcing a chuckle. Leila, dear, there must be some misunderstanding. You know how complicated business can be. She held up a hand. Spare me, Faisal. I know exactly how business works. And I also know Khalid didn't sign anything from his hospital bed. But please keep talking. I'd love to hear how you explain this away. Dead silence. The cousins, the aunts, the concerned nephews. Suddenly, none of them had anything to say. But Leila wasn't done. She reached for another document, sliding it across the table with a kind of slow, deliberate movement that made them sweat. And this, she continued, her voice still infuriatingly calm, a court motion declaring Khalid unfit to control his assets, filed while he was in a coma? Wow, that's some timing. A younger cousin who had been quiet until now shifted in his chair. Leila, we were just looking out for the family. You have to understand, we were only thinking about what's best. What's best, she repeated, tilting her head. Best for who exactly? Because I don't see Khalid's wishes anywhere in this little coup attempt. What I do see is a bunch of desperate people trying to grab what they never worked for. She stood then, pressing her palms against the table, her once polished smile vanishing. So let me make something very, very clear. You will not touch Khalid's empire. You will not get a single dirham from his fortune. And if you even think about trying something this stupid again, I will make sure every last one of you regrets it. She let that sink in. Let them feel the weight of her words. Let them see the fire in her eyes. Because they had underestimated her. They had seen her as just the wife, a grieving, vulnerable woman too weak to fight back. But now they saw the truth. She wasn't just defending Khalid's fortune, she was declaring war. And for the first time they realized they were already losing. Listen closely, because this isn't just a story, it's a lesson, a warning, a reminder that when money's on the table, blood means nothing, and loyalty has a price tag. This is about power, greed, and a woman who refused to be a victim. So sit tight, because we're just getting started. After that little family meeting, you'd think they'd back off, right? Maybe feel a little shame, a little regret. Oh, please, these people didn't know the meaning of shame. If anything, they doubled down. They got bolder, more desperate. They tried different angles, some sweet, some aggressive. One cousin tried to play the "let's keep it in the family" card. Another tried to intimidate her, warning that things could get messy if she didn't cooperate. And Uncle Faisal? Oh, Faisal was still running around, making backdoor deals, whispering in the ears of corrupt lawyers and greedy businessmen, thinking he could outmaneuver her. They thought she was alone, powerless, just a wife drowning in a world of corporate sharks. They had no idea who they were dealing with. While they were busy scheming, Leila was building an army. She reached out to Khalid's most trusted advisors, the real backbone of his empire. Men and women who had built their careers alongside him, who respected him, not because of his money, but because of his vision. And when they realized what was happening, they didn't just stand behind Leila, they stood with her. She didn't just fight back, she took over. Boardrooms that once whispered about whether she was capable of handling Khalid's businesses were now hanging on to her every word. Executives who had once dismissed her as just the wife were now watching as she made power moves even Khalid would have been proud of. Every attempt to undermine her, she crushed it. Every sneaky legal loophole they tried to exploit, she shut it down. The empire wasn't just surviving without Khalid, it was thriving. But this wasn't just a business battle. No, no, no. This was about legacy, about reputation, and about making sure these vultures never got another chance to sink their claws into what wasn't theirs. And so Leila did something they never expected. She took them to court. She didn't just play defense. She went on the attack. She brought everything to light, the forged signatures, the shady financial moves, the backdoor deals. She had evidence. She had the best lawyers money could buy. And most importantly, she had the truth. And in a court of law, when the truth is loud enough, even the greediest, most well-connected liars can't escape it. The trial was a spectacle. The media feasted on it like a scandalous soap opera. The once powerful relatives, who had walked around with such arrogance, now sat in courtrooms, sweating under the weight of their own corruption. Witness after witness took the stand. Employees, advisors, even some of their own friends, all exposing their lies, their greed, their betrayal. And then, just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse for them, Khalid woke up. That's right. The man they had written off, the man they had tried to rob blind, opened his eyes. And let me tell you, he wasn't happy. The moment Khalid regained consciousness, the entire city buzzed with the news. His empire, his fortune, his name had been dragged through the mud while he lay helpless. And the people responsible? His own family? The rage that burned in his eyes when he heard what had happened? Oh, it was something to behold. Doctors said he needed rest, but Khalid wasn't a man who took orders. Not from doctors, not from fate, and definitely not from thieves. Against medical advice, he had himself wheeled straight into the courtroom. And when those doors opened, when he rolled in, eyes sharp, voice steady, his presence alone was enough to send a cold chill through the air. The courtroom, once filled with greedy whispers and confident smirks, fell into absolute silence. And then he spoke. "I built this empire with my own hands," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "And you, You tried to tear it apart while I was fighting for my life. His words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They were heavy, filled with the kind of disappointment that was worse than any rage. One by one, he called them out, exposed their greed, their lies, their betrayals. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His mere presence was enough to destroy them. The judge didn't take long to rule in their favor. The case was clear. Leila and Khalid won. The greedy relatives, stripped of any claim, publicly humiliated, and left with nothing but the shame of their own actions. And Uncle Faisal? Let's just say he wasn't seen in high society again. Khalid might have been the one to build the empire, but after this battle, everyone knew the truth. Leila had protected it. She wasn't just his wife. She was a force to be reckoned with. And together, they were stronger than ever. The mansion was quieter now. No more fake relatives pretending to care. No more backstabbing whispers behind closed doors. Just peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you've won a war. Khalid recovered. Leila remained by his side, not as a woman who had been saved, but as the woman who had done the saving. And the empire? Oh, the empire was untouchable now, because if this battle had proven anything, it was that no one, not family, not fate, not even death itself, could bring down the Al-Mansur legacy. So what's the lesson here? Simple. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. When power is up for grabs, you'll see who's truly loyal and who's just waiting for their chance to betray you. Family isn't about blood, it's about trust. And the moment you forget that, the moment you let your guard down, that's when the vultures strike. But there's another lesson too. Never underestimate the quiet ones, the wives, the women standing just behind the throne, because sometimes when the king falls, it's the queen who saves the kingdom.